My name is Craig Picken. I'm an executive recruiter. More than a decade ago, I started my practice for one purpose: to use my experience as a former military aviator, business jet sales executive, and P&L leader to help aviation and aerospace companies and their executives be fast, adaptable, and strategic. I do these podcasts to inspire and inform, but more importantly, they are a focused platform to help business leaders grow. Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. So welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Michael Bruno on with me. Michael is the business editor for Aviation Week magazine. I love reading his editorials. He writes great stuff. We trade a lot of emails back and forth.
We do.
So it's great to have you on.
Thank you. No, it's a real honor to be here. I mean, I love watching your podcasts. You get great guests. So thank you.
Lots of interesting stuff happening in the industry. So I guess we can. Where do you want to start? We got eVTOL, we got people, we got MRO. What hasn't been disrupted in the industry the last 12 months?
Oh my goodness! I'm just sort of waiting for somebody to bring back biplane, or try to make something out of gliders, or sky's the limit right now. We are coming off of the most incredible, hardest hitting reset that this industry certainly has seen in living memory, and probably since World War II. And so, on the one hand, we're still recovering, and there's a lot to be said for that. But on the other hand, the recovery is here. You look around, we've got more commercial air traffic passengers booking flights for their summer vacations. MRO shops, the repair shops for these airliners are starting to see increased activity. A lot of talent flow going on around the industry. I would sort of say, let's start with the beginning, the commercial aircraft recovery, because that's kind of what got us into this mess. And that's ultimately what's going to determine when we finally ultimately recovered. We come out of the pandemic, and we've still got a lot of parked airliners around the world. But interestingly, not so many of them have necessarily been retired just yet. And the thing about those retirements is, everybody's watching to see whether there's an expected wave of the old aircraft getting retired. And that's because new generation aircraft like the 737 Maxes and the A320 Neos are going to have far better fuel efficiency. So, on the one hand, you think, okay, that'll be good for manufacturing. There's a sort of a natural inclination to buy the newer generation aircraft and get rid of the old ones. But at the same time, the old ones, they're already here. You can fly passengers. They're cheaper. Oil hasn't surged yet. We're kind of back to a sort of a $60 a barrel oil. We've seen higher. And so, we're at this weird state of the recovery where things could still kind of go either way, although I think the optimism is there that the recovery is happening.
Yeah, look, I see a lot of threats to the industry. We were talking about before we hit record on this. It was the light switch got turned off when COVID hit. Everybody's worried about cash flow. Airlines laid off thousands of people. The shareholders got to be doing an Irish jig because PPP money bailed them out. Hey, Delta shareholders, just thank Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden for your stock being at where it's at now. But a lot of pilots are gone. A lot of 60-year-old to 65-year-old pilots are just like, hey, I'm wrapping it up. They're gone. They're never coming back.
Yeah, a lot of technicians are gone.
Technicians are gone.
Flight crews are gone. Within the manufacturing side, you've got seasoned executives who know how to run a production line. People who saw the last major ramp up, the historic ramp up that we saw of the narrow bodies, getting to around 60 new ones a month getting produced. I think this talent issue is and that's one reason I talked to you, Craig, but I think this talent issue is going to actually be one of the biggest bugaboos that haunts this industry going forward. And I think that because there is no substitute for experience and for knowledged workers who are in the right place at the right time. I
Agree.
mean, maybe there's a surplus of folks out there that you can go snag for a relatively cheaper amount of money than maybe you could a couple of years ago, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're still in the right place at the right time in the right industry, able to fully use their knowledge. So, I wonder for this industry, we are now seeing this final historic retirement of the baby boomers, and people who are older than them who have decided for whatever reason now is a good time to get out, or they had to get out because it wasn't their choice. And I don't think we've even begun to see the effects of what that's going to mean as to how this industry run, all of the industries, manufacturing, airlines, MRO shops, business aviation. I think the other shoes to drop on that.
Yeah, look, I think that it comes down. No, I agree, and where there's this, where you see in economics, where you see massive periods of overabundance. You saw the housing. We saw it in housing back in the financial crisis, where foreclosures galore created this overabundance, price drop, and then all of a sudden everybody gets out, and now you're seeing a massive shortage. You're going to see the same thing, I think, in talent in aerospace. We did a horrible job really bringing young people into the executive ranks, or we were big, we were stuffy, we were lumbering companies,
right,
without a lot of like, you're competing against Apple, you're competing against Microsoft, Dell.
Yeah, there's that big bathtub in the demographics.
Every
right?
startup company in Boston, which is like, hey, we're doing really cool things in the fintech world. Look, that's your competition. And if you come along and we're some big stuffy aerospace company, we're an oligopoly, and because that doesn't necessarily attract the demographics that are coming up behind us right now.
It doesn't yet, but I do think there's a couple of silver linings on this cloud, and one of them is I think that the aerospace and defense world is finally sort of getting on board with, if you'll go with me for a moment, with the save the world mantra that so many other industries like technology were able to present. Whether it was real or not, we can have a whole other debate about that. But with the ESG movement, and it's now finally hitting home with aerospace and defense, you're just genuinely hearing more of our companies in this industry talk about the effect of not only do we do great things with connecting the world or providing sovereign, defense for countries, but also we're really actually working hard to try to reduce the carbon footprint. We're going to put sensors and other things in outer space in a responsible way. By the way, the responsible way is key there, but we're going to put this enabling technology that's going to help us do a whole lot of other things that are really required for decarbonizing the world to get to a goal of, neutrality by 2050. And it's sort of disappointing on the one hand that it took us so long in this industry to get there, but it looks like it's here. We can finally make the claim to the younger generations that you will not be hurting the world, and you will be helping the world by joining one of these big aerospace defense companies or a startup.
Well, I see, look, I think everybody's talking about eVTOL right now. eVTOL is the billions of dollars in investment coming into
buzzword. You and I should go start a company and put eVTOL on it.
I'm like the biggest skeptic. I've told people, I'm going to create a SPAC called When Pigs Fly, and I'm going to build wings for pigs. I'm going to get them saddles, and I'm going to go fly them, because that's literally, I think, where it's at. I don't think urban mobility is really a thing, and I may be totally wrong, and quite frankly, I hope I am, but I'm just not there yet. Where I see it is not for people. I see it for cargo. I see it for urban. I see, if you want to get trucks off roads, like New York City, if you want to, decrease the amount of trucks going across the GW or through the Lincoln Tunnel, there's this great technology that's coming out. But what I see is like fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cells. And that's all of a sudden got me excited, because I see these people going, hey, wait a minute, we can start to do stuff, a little less jet engine, a little bit more hydrogen fuel. All right, it's probably 20 years off, but it's exciting. And anything in aviation is 20 years anyway. So.
Right, exactly. It takes us 10 years to get warmed up in this
Right.
industry. And, by 20 years, we'll have kind of figured it out. And I do think you're right there about hydrogen. To think 20 years from now, um, hydrogen will be real as a sustainable fuel for long haul. It may not be the complete solution. We may not, entirely have airliners, wide bodies running on it, but you're going to have enough of the large commercial aircraft that use hydrogen, and then in combination with other electric hybrid systems within the aircraft, where the aircraft is very well neutral, carbon neutral, and that's genuinely going to happen. You can already see the timeline from the people that we cover at Aviation Week. They tell us you can already see the timeline, and barring some kind of massive financial disruption that would be necessary to keep those investments happening, it's gonna happen. Um, Now that the funny thing about hydrogen is, unlike any other, I think, fuel advance that's happened yet, um, that's going to allow for some major changes, perhaps finally, to the aircraft. I mean, the aircraft may look different
Right.
from the way they look now. You may have more blended wing type of structures rather than the tube in the wings we have now. There's a lot to be said for that visual that changes. And when the aircrafts change because of the designs that are required from hydrogen, you may get a whole new level of excitement. And then, you stick the other things in there like supersonic travel, hypersonic travel, um, maybe not hypersonic commercial travel, but supersonic for sure by then. Really exciting. I do want to say that, following up on your eVTOL comment, I will have to admit that I'm mostly there with you in the skepticism column. And it's simply from experience. If eVTOL was such a great solution in moving people around, wouldn't we be there already with helicopters? And we're not. Now, I know there's differences in noise, and the panache of an eVTOL may bring new people into the market. But we've had this capability for a good long time, and we don't have heliports in everybody's backyard or on the roof of my house. And there's lots of good reasons. And one of the big ones I think about a whole lot lately is, during the pandemic, everything went quiet. I live in Arlington, Virginia, and normally I get everything from the president flying over my house to the International Space Station to the Thunderbirds and aircraft taking off from DCA. And it's just been really nice and quiet.
Yep.
And I think people will remember this time and then a potential future when you have eVTOLs flying all over the place, kind of darkening the sky with their presence. And I'm not quite sure the public's going to let that happen as easily. So that's where my skepticism resides.
Well, that's my thing, is that nobody's defined what is urban mobility. Is urban mobility does Sally getting her little eVTOL and fly to Publix to go pick up dinner, or is it going from Orange County to some place in LA? Nobody's really defined what it is. And you think about, like, we've got Robinson helicopters. Look up, Robinson helicopters are, it's old technology. It's a piston engine, relatively fuel efficient. They're very reliable. Proven technology. They're very reliable, but nobody's made any money flying them from. Nobody's made any money flying them from Orange County to LA when they very well could.
Right.
New York, the Blades and the Associated Air Groups and the Heliflights in New York are, it's a pretty competitive, low margin business.
It is. And I think you're right in the sense that absolutely you can always guarantee that the easier return on the money, the quicker marketplace, like cargo, is where you're going to see some of these things pick up. And it won't necessarily be my pizza getting delivered by eVTOL or a UAV. It'll be the eVTOL maybe ferrying cargo between Los Angeles and some other city within, inside the continental US, particularly if you're flying over the desert or something like that. When you got a route that's low population, you can definitely see eVTOLs playing a role there. Obviously, with the military, the military is looking at eVTOLs from everything from getting people between bases to just checking out their ICBM fields,
Right.
out in the northern part of the United States. That makes sense. The
Mhm.
idea of getting from, as you said, Manhattan out to Martha's Vineyard or something like that, that could take a long, long time.
Well, that's like you're already seeing pushback in the Hamptons, helicopter traffic in the Hamptons, and the political environment's one that just people, for whatever reason, that's going to be a hurdle.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
to overcome.
I agree.
So.
But I will tell you, so let's talk about one section, I think, of the aerospace and defense that's taking off,
Right.
literally, that I am really excited about, and that is commercial space.
Yes.
I think I'd love to hear, because you've been here for a while in the industry, and you've seen the space ventures of the 90s come and go. And I didn't necessarily. I wasn't around as a reporter then. So, to me, it's really exciting. I think we're really going to see it. But
absolutely.
What do you think?
I think absolutely. Well, look, the day is coming. I remember I was talking to somebody. I said, I remember back in the early mid 90s when XM satellite was, they're like getting ready to launch. And you thought that's the coolest thing. And I was an immediate subscriber to XM. But it cost them like several $100 million to put their stuff up into space, which today Elon Musk can do for about 20. He's done an incredible job. SpaceX and Blue Origin, they've done such a great job of lowering the cost of putting satellites into orbit.
Yeah.
And now you see the low Earth orbit stuff, the One Skies, the internet from space. Well, you think about internet from space to support the Internet of Things and 5G. I'm like, yeah, okay. Now what's the challenge there is how many satellites can you put in low Earth orbit and still, who's going to monitor, who's going to be the controlling party for that? But
yep. That is a huge, I think that is perhaps the biggest unsettled challenge that commercial space is going to wind up seeing. And I'm not the smartest person in the room to figure that out. I heard that from Jim Bridenstine, the former NASA administrator, just recently. He was saying he thinks orbital debris and orbital mitigation is going to be the biggest challenge, because very quickly, with tens of thousands of satellites going up in low Earth orbit, you're going to have an air traffic control, a space traffic control problem, with all the other debris out there, and just clearing the orbital fields and making sure everybody's safe. And that stuff will rear its ugly head, and it'll only take one or two more collisions before everybody looks up and says somebody's got to do something about it. And then the question is who? Right. And it can't just be Washington. It can't just be the United States government. There's going to need to be the equivalent of a new outer space treaty from the 1960s, the late 1960s. It was developed between the US and the Soviet Union to try to make sort of a rules of the road. And it was great. It worked for a while, but it's out of date. We're going to need a new one now. And you don't hear a lot of traction being made about how to make this work. And it's one of those, tragedy of the commons.
It's going to be like laws of the seas. It's almost like it's got to be maritime. It's like, you read about maritime law and you're like, wow, where did all that come from? But it's like hundreds of years of conventions and things like that. And between the US and China, the political environment there, and then who else wants to launch, their stuff. Korea's launching stuff and Japan's launching stuff. And you're going, all right, we gotta, it's in all of our collective best interests to, at least find some sort of common ground as to how we're gonna, keep, I don't know, look, I'm not a space scientist. Do we keep, is there some sort of corridor that's open? Is there some, extension up that you say, hey, this is kind of launch area and everything else has to go? I don't know. I don't know how it works.
Yeah. Spaceports, one of the issues we cover is the rise of spaceports and how there are dozens of proposed spaceports just in the US. And there's only a handful of real spaceports that are actually, active on a regular basis. And right now that's digestible. when you only have kind of 6 major spaceports. But if you someday get to a point where either you've got spaceports because there are commercial companies that are bringing products back down to Earth, finished products to then, sell in the marketplace, or whether you're bringing tourists or
Right.
people who are flying into space and coming back down, and you don't want to have to drive out to New Mexico just to go do this space trip. You want to do it from your home in, Illinois or something like that. When we have that many spaceports going on, there's going to need to be a lot more rules of the road and just air traffic control. And,
Absolutely.
I think that's one of those going to be mind-blowing moments when people realize, oh, I can't just fly from DC to LA anymore straight across because I'm going to go across a couple of spaceports. How do you
Right.
make that work?
That's crazy. What about, so let's talk about the political environment. Does China start to buy Boeing again, or is that for a
That's
a different day? Or
that's it.
or do they just try to make it on their own and cut everybody out, just cut everybody else out of the pattern?
That is the $600 billion question, isn't it? And that's scary for commercial aviation manufacturing. If we really are on the precipice of China and the US bifurcating, and China going forward as its own ecosystem of aircraft manufacturing, which it could, it may take a while, and they may not do it right for a very long time, but they'll get there eventually. I mean, there's a very crude analogy about the Soviet Union and nuclear weapons, right? They didn't have them first, the US did. But knowledge gets passed around eventually. It's very hard to control, and it takes enough trial and error, and you too can have that ultimate capability. And China can very well get there, where it has a commercial aviation system that's not just airlines and MRO shops to repair them, but it's got, more importantly, the supply chains that can feed all of these Comac built aircraft. It's possible, but it's going to take a long time. And in between then and now, there's the chance for the US, hopefully, to figure out a way to say, look, we'd like to partner with you economically, but we're going to, resist you politically. It's a dance. How do we do that? I don't know. I think right now, honestly, my gut says it is a 40-60 shot. It's a 40% possibility that China goes its own way and has its own ecosystem. I think there's a 60% chance that we stay tied. But even with a 60% chance, things are going to change. I don't think Boeing is ever going to sell the number of airliners into China that it was expecting to sell pre-pandemic.
Right.
I don't think it's going to sell those again. Maybe Airbus does. I'm not even sure Airbus is going to do it, but Airbus is in a better position than Boeing politically, because they're a little more closely tied to China. So it's a huge question.
Yeah, the ultimate thing though is that Airbus airplanes fly with GE engines and Pratt and Whitney engines, and they fly with Rolls-Royce engines too. But a lot of that stuff is it's a unique political environment, which I don't think anybody really anticipated.
It is,
10 years ago.
I think that it's fascinating. Here we are with a new presidential administration. The old one, and it was a very different administration. The old one provided some new authority and some new opportunity for the Biden administration to use as leverage. And one thing's guaranteed in presidential transitions is the successor administration always enjoys the authorities that the last one provided for it. Whether it's Obama coming after Bush and all of the presidential authority that came out of the Homeland Security response to 9/11, or whether it's Biden responding to Trump and all of the expansive presidential authority he went after, particularly with China. We're going to see Biden take advantage of that leverage, and we're already seeing the Biden administration say, hey, not so fast. We're not exactly just unwinding all of the Trump regulations. Right. So it's going to take a little while for this to play out, and I'm as interested to see where it goes as anybody.
Yeah. The shame of it all is that everybody in the business aviation sector, 20 years ago, everybody said, "Hey, look, China's the next frontier. We can sell some airplanes over there," and they did. But now all those airplanes are going somewhere else. I mean, that whole market is not going to be. I mean, everybody thought it was going to be a infrastructure thing, but the infrastructure would get built to support a growing Chinese economy.
Right.
Now everybody,
Right.
I think all the business jet manufacturers are like, yeah, okay, I think this is kind of lost money. It'll never happen.
Yeah, and the business jet community to me is kind of taking it at both ends. So China isn't growing, isn't going to probably turn out to be the marketplace that you just said everybody expected 20 years ago or hoped. On the other end, they're going to have real competition from new OEMs, supersonic biz jet providers,
Yep.
to the extent that these eVTOLs maybe eat into their marketplace. That could very well happen. And then there's just, don't forget about high-speed rail and electric vehicles on the ground, Teslas and such. If we make that whole experience better and easier, if the Biden administration's infrastructure push for high-speed rail comes to pass, there just could be less of a reason to get your own G6 or
Right.
whatever. And so I think the business aviation community is actually facing some of the potentially biggest change amongst the subsectors. I don't know. What do you think?
I
Do you
think
feel like they're
I think the
harmed?
sharing economy. I mean, I think the sharing economy is really affecting it more than anything. When you think about fractional was booming, and then it sort of plateaued, and then net jets almost went out of business. If it weren't for the big influx from Berkshire Hathaway, and big capital influx back in during the financial crisis.
Yep.
FlexJet got sold to Directional Aviation relatively cheaply. Now both of those businesses are starting to take off again. Part 135 has taken off again. So you see all the 135 and all the operators taking off, but nobody's selling new airplanes. All the OEMs are sort of like, hey, we're kind of, and what do they had to do? They all had to go bigger, farther, longer.
Yep.
Because that's where the money's made.
Exactly. Large cabins.
But the people who really need the lift are these people that are sort of the small. They don't want a G6 or G650.
Right.
G600, G650. They need a CJ.
Yeah.
But Cessna doesn't make a lot of money selling CJs, and Embraer doesn't make a lot of money selling Embraer. So it's a chicken or egg thing. That's a business model that's got to be figured out.
One company that I watch to see sort of how that goes is Honda Jet.
Yeah.
I think if overnight you see their sales take off in kind of a sustainable way, then that more people on the lower end, the smaller cabin, it's here to stay. The private aviation experience, BizJet experience could very well be here to stay. But if that doesn't happen, as you just said, you can't just keep looking to large cabin as it can't be the only growth driver for the business aviation community, specifically not for the manufacturers.
Right.
It's diminishing returns.
I mean, I look at what's Daher with the TBM 940 or 930. You talk about $4 or $5 million airplane. Money's cheap. Tax rates are going to go up, so it's a bigger tax write-off.
Yep.
But I'm thinking, hey, look, maybe I'll go find if I'm a 10, 20, $30 million company that needs that lift, maybe I'll go buy a couple of those. Maybe if maybe the people that are making that class of airplanes should really be pumping it for. This is the ultimate solution for your mid-size market. The Pilatus, the PC-12, what a phenomenal airplane.
Right. Proven again.
Yeah. It doesn't use that much gas. I mean, it's sort of great. But it's a great value. And think about $5 million, $4 or $5 million. And you can finance it cheap, and you can run them from Chicago to anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Plenty of parts. Yeah.
And it's reliable, and you got lift. So I think the whole industry is going to have to morph itself a little bit.
You mentioned one other issue I was watching. You mentioned politics, but the taxes in particular, and that got me thinking. I really do kind of think we're at an inflection point on a lot of the macroeconomic factors that are going to hit this industry in probably new ways, because you never step into the same river twice.
Right.
Taxes are going to go up, and we've seen taxes go up again, go up before, but we've never seen taxes go up, inflation go up, maybe oil prices go up to the degree that we're saying when demographics are going down, retirements are happening, changes in demographics around the world. I think there's a lot of confluences that the aerospace and defense industry is seeing on a macroeconomic level, probably this next coming 10 years, that are going to hit some of these subsectors in new ways, like BizAv. What
Sure.
happens when taxes go up and oil prices go up? It's like, is that going to help or hurt? Are people going to rush to buy things to get it done, or are they just going to hold off and say, I can't afford to sustain that asset?
Yeah, that's the $64,000. Yeah, that's a $64,000 question right there. It's if oil goes back to $100, God help us all. Quite frankly,
Right.
I mean, yeah, everybody thinks it's going to be green, but look, we're not, we're not anywhere, we're not anywhere near seeing all electric vehicles on the road. And even if we were, we got to figure out how to pay for the roads because you're not getting any money from gas taxes, so that's a whole different thing. The thing that I think is what's really bothered me is the class structure on business aviation. Business aviation supports $200 billion of economy. You think about the Cessnas, the Gulfstreams, the Embraers, the manufacturers, the FBOs, the
airports.
caterers.
Yep.
It's a free lunch because and I think the Obama administration was really bad. The fat cats flying their private jets. Well, I'm like, wait a minute. Fat cats flying their private jets are supporting $200 billion worth of jobs, including
Right.
13,000 of them in Savannah, Georgia, and a whole boatload of them in Wichita. So
that shotgun shot took out a lot of collateral damage.
I was like, why don't we tone down the rhetoric a little bit? It's sort of like what's happening in green energy right now. It's all of a sudden anybody who's a fracker or a pipeline or whatever is a bad person. Like, well, you think about the entire economy for the last 5 years grew off of becoming energy independent as a nation.
Yep.
Maybe we don't need to be, maybe the political rhetoric needs to die. Maybe we don't need to be bashing everybody.
I agree. And that takes you all the way back to China, for instance. I don't think the rest of the country truly appreciates that China was the growth market for commercial aviation manufacturing. And commercial aviation manufacturing was the leading exporting industry for the United States for a good long time. The Aerospace Industries Association has been tracking the trade balance and the net positives that commercial aviation was responsible for. It's defense sales help, but they are not as big and they are not as reliable as commercial aviation manufacturing was. And selling these Maxes and 787s around the world was very important to U.S. industry and U.S. manufacturing. And if China is lost as a market, whether on purpose politically or by accident politically, that's really going to hit home in many, many small communities. You're talking all the way out to Wichita and Oklahoma and supply chain suppliers in Texas. If you're just supplying to the US market and maybe Europe, you're going to need 30, 40, 50% fewer of them.
Yep. Well, there's one thing too, is I learned competition makes for better competitors. China's a competitor. I mean, China is now a competitor to the United States economically, and they will be it forevermore. The answer to industry is, hey, look, stifle the rhetoric and compete. Just be better. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge to the administration now is to, hey, look, you can talk privately to the Chinese and voice your concerns, but let's get it out of the newspaper with, China, you do the same. Let's just, let's get it out. Let's get the rhetoric out of the public. Let's stop talking about boycotting Olympics and human rights. And, yes, those are important subjects, but those dialogues can be had in less of a public forum, I think, which creates less animosity between the two countries.
Let the diplomats do their thing. Exactly.
Gorbachev said it very well. Yes, and sometimes I think he's right. He says the United States needs an enemy. And I'm like, well, maybe I think in a lot of ways he was right. Our self-righteousness becomes very prevalent.
And it's self-consuming. Yeah. But, I will say one other thing, though, for industry across every subsector, whether it's biz av, commercial aviation, defense, space, whatever, there is a key thing they have to do as well, and that is invest.
Yes.
If we are going to compete with China, our companies have to take more of their own money and put it into developing newer and better products and newer and better services more than they are now. I know some spend more money than others, and there's a lot of complaint that the government R&D, has subsided over the decades, and that's absolutely true. But our business community is actually very strong as a whole, and these companies need to do a better job of their own independent research and development and applying it forward, and not just protecting their own franchises, but coming up with new products. Right? In aviation, it's always new products. It's the new biz jet, it's the new airliner, it's the new rocket, it's the new spacecraft, that excites people, right, that brings the market in and grows the market. And I would just put out there a call basically for our own industry to get going.
Yeah.
Let's let the diplomats do their thing, but you business people do your thing and invest more.
Right. Absolutely. No, absolutely. Look, there's so much investment capital awash in the world right now. You just look at all the SPACs that are going out there and people saying, hey, look, yeah, we're creating this, this investment vehicle, send us your money and we'll invest it wisely.
Right.
Private equity is going crazy right now. Money is cheap. It can be borrowed and it can be used to invest. And, what does that look like? Is that a new middle market aircraft from Boeing, which is 30% more fuel efficient? I think Airbus did it well. Bombardier did great. I look at the A220 and I think the A220 could literally be a game changer. I mean, it
was for Bombardier.
It totally, yeah. But it's like, all right, so Bombardier, you got a half rate. You developed a great airplane. You went bankrupt in the process,
right? Which is unfortunately a very common story in this industry.
It's like real estate development. It's like it's always the third real estate developer in the community that makes all the money right after the first two went bankrupt.
Right.
But that airplane could be a game changer from a lot of ways. It'll be interesting to see how they do it.
The A220, I do agree, is an excellent example of innovation and how the industry can help take a step forward. If you kind of take Bombardier's own problems out of it for a moment, it's let's be real. Developing a new aircraft, 10, 15, 20 billion dollars. If it's a commercial aircraft, right. 5, 10 billion if it's a business jet or something like that. But it's billions of dollars one way or another. Mm-hmm. And nobody should take that for granted. It's just, to me, it's a narrative that needs to be presented to shareholders as a necessary evil. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be in the aerospace business, you're going to have to invest this money, put down the billions of dollars. You got to manage it correctly. Don't get me wrong. Don't let it bankrupt you or almost bankrupt you like Bombardier and others. But you're going to have to put the money forward.
Yeah, it's a wide moat. I mean, it creates the barriers to entry are very high. But if you invest in it, the bottom line is you've got a Boeing Airbus oligopoly. You got Embraer kind of down there now, and that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I've seen some interesting scenarios.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about M&A. M&A in this industry is it's mind-boggling right now. I was talking to a couple of advisors at some DC area firms, and they were talking about how in their own 30, 35-year career, they've never seen so many buyers out there, and they've never seen so many sellers. And what they mean by sellers is everybody's a seller. Like right now, there's the potential for just kind of name your price. Mm-hmm. Even companies that you think are doing well, if a big enough private equity buyer comes in and offers them enough money, who isn't going to sell? Just
Right.
about everybody will sell right now, and there are enough people out there with money to buy. It's just incredible.
Well, that's that's what happens when the Fed keeps printing and interest rates are, they say, hey, it's very dovish. Got to go make some money somewhere. But yeah, no, look, I mean, I seriously thought, when we were at the depths of COVID and Boeing stock was down to about $80, I literally thought Carlyle or Blackstone or BlackRock or one of the bigger, I literally thought that they were going to get taken over. And
Completely agree. I am a little surprised that an activist investor did not step into Boeing at that time.
And just say, we're going to take it, we're going to buy it, we're going to take it private, we'll see you guys in a couple of years. And you think about, like, what shareholder, quite frankly, back when it was $89, what shareholder wouldn't have taken 100 for the whole company? Now it's up to 250 or something like that. But who knew back then that it would recover? And maybe, I don't know, maybe overvalued now. But I wonder what's going to happen to Rolls-Royce. You think about Rolls-Royce on the
Rolls-Royce, I will say that Rolls-Royce to me isn't so much of a mystery. I just simply do not believe the British government is going to let that asset go away. I do not think it's possible. I think they were willing to do things for other parts of the aerospace supply chain, like GKN with Melrose, that deal that happened, Cobham getting taken over by private equity. As long as the supply isn't disrupted, I think the government and the jobs weren't slashed overnight. I don't think they were, they weren't happy about those companies being sort of de-Britified, but it happened. Rolls-Royce is an entirely different scenario. If they lose Rolls-Royce, the basically the whole British effort to be an aerospace entity, to be meaningful in the industry anymore, is gone. And so I they'll do what it takes. I mean, that one to me is too big to fail on the British end. So ultimately, will they partner with somebody like Raytheon Technologies? I could see a partnership, particularly one that's helped to be brokered by the governments, US and UK. But I don't think anybody's going to take over Rolls-Royce. I would just be shocked. Now, maybe we'll come back in a couple of years and you put me on the spot and say, Bruno, you didn't see that acquisition coming, but I will be surprised.
Yeah, no, well, that's, I sort of agree with the same. I agree with the same way. Now, the UK wants to get, Tempest aircraft, and they're not going to go buy Pratt & Whitney or GE for their own homegrown aircraft.
No.
They can invest in some, they can, whatever Boeing creates or whatever Airbus creates as a new platform of airplane, the British government can come in and act as a backstop to any investment. So I tend to agree with you. Maybe I see another joint venture, Pratt, Raytheon, Rolls-Royce JV, much like IAE was, and they come back to that. So we'll have to see what happens. So it's a lot of balls in the air in the industry. It's a lot of fun right now. To see how it all plays out.
Absolutely, I agree.
Are you bullish? Are you bullish, or you bullish, bearish, or do you think some candles need to be lit under under the butts of some CEOs?
I am. I do think some candles need to be lit for sure. I talked about investment there. I think there's a lot more work that I expect out of industry CEOs on investment. I expect more work out of them out of workforce development, not just talent recruitment, but talent development. I think it's folly to think that you can count on the government to come in every 10 to 20 years and bail out this industry. Maybe I'm becoming too much of a stick in the mud, but I think if that happens once more in living memory, people are going to say, look, stop subsidizing that industry. It's like horse and buggies. It's just like, let the marketplace take care of it. And we've all moved on to other industries. So I think there's going to be a need to find a sustainable way to develop and recruit people. I think there needs to be a sustainable way to build new products. But I'm overall a pragmatist. I think the glass is too big, not half full, not half empty. But I would say I'm a little bit of a bullish pragmatist. I mean, between growing middle class populations around the world. I think with the rise of commercial space, I think with business aviation and private aviation proving some resiliency through the pandemic, and all of this is going to be need to be repaired. So there's a future for MRO one way or another.
Yep.
There's growth, there's opportunity. It may be painful change, and some people may not survive that change.
Mhm.
But overall, the trajectory is still up. I think we're still going up.
I agree with you. Everybody talks about. I know, AAR was doing a great job with workforce development. John Holmes, he was doing, and still is. They understand that good technicians are going to be hard to find, and they're investing in kids early. Every company that is involved in this area needs to be. It's you can't invest in them when they're 20. It's when they're 10. And you start investing when you figure out creative ways. I don't care how you do it, but get them interested in education and developing their brains and getting them excited about space and satellites and connectivity. And I'm bullish as well. I don't think that, I know some people say the airlines are never going to come back because of Zoom. I'm like, no. No.
They'll come back. They will come back. They may not have the same business model. Maybe the business traveler doesn't come back like he or she used to. But you can still have a market with leisure travel. And they were population-wise the vast majority of people who got on aircraft. Yeah. So change your business model. Maybe that'll be painful, probably, but it can happen. You can do it.
Yep. So exciting times. So why don't we do this? Let's end it here and come back. We'll get you back on in a couple of weeks. We'll just talk about the state of the industry and where we are in a couple of weeks.
I love it. It was a real honor being here. Thanks for having me.
Man, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on. I love reading your articles, your editorials. They're always spot on. So Michael Bruno is the business editor for Aviation Week. Get a subscription, read his stuff. It's fantastic. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Craig.
I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at northstaresg.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Piven.